The Confederacy, CSA, or just the South. So anytime you're writing in your journals, for either of those sides, the North or the South, you can use any of those terms to refer to them as. Next week we'll start talking about different names they called each other, like Yankee and Rebel. So, and there's others among those. So you can refer to those names, South and North, in your journal just like that. Instead of, Confederacy, you can shorten it to CSA because they did. Right. So we're going to talk about how many states each side had. Does anyone know during the Civil War how many states the North was made up of, or the Union? Anyone know how many states were made up in the Union? You want to give it a shot?
15.
15? More? Trent? Yeah. 25? 20 what?
22.
22?
21.
21? 17? No. We're close. Someone said it. I heard it.
23.
Yeah. Who said it? Seth? All right. Give me 1 minute. No, I'll move forward here in a second. Okay. So the North has 23 states. Now, in 1863, they will get 24 because West Virginia will become a state in 1863. Did I say 63? Yeah, 1863. West Virginia becomes a state, so they bump up to 24. In the North, anyone over on the North side know the name of your capital? You better. What's your capital, Courtney? It's not in that reading. That was for next week. The North, yeah. What's your capital? You've been there.
D.C.
Yeah, Washington, D.C. is your capital. Okay, in the map there, the blue states are the United States of America. You can see there's some over to the west, California, and some in the Midwest. But then there's also a huge chunk of black, which are territories and are not states yet. So the blue is the United States of America. All right, so the North has 23 states, and we have 5 groups in here based on the number of people, and then we have 3 groups with a smaller amount of people. So how many states do you think that the South has? Tristan? 24. So there's more. Now I want you to think about this. There's more Union groups in this classroom than there are Confederate groups. So what do you think? 4, you say? 5?
9.
There's actually 11. And then you can see there's the yellow states that are the border states. Those are states that believed in slavery, did not want to secede from the Union, and they stayed with the North. So we call them border states. But there's 11 states in the South, and does anyone know their capital? Only 100 miles south of D.C., not very far away. The South capital. Caitlin? Richmond, Virginia. Good job. Is that what you were going to say?
That's where my person is.
Oh, that's where your person is from?
Yeah.
Richmond, Virginia? Good. So that's where the capital is. Not very far away at all from D.C. So looking at the number of states, okay, we're going to talk about the population there and how many people are living around there. So what do you think about in the North? 23 states. What do you think about in the North? How many people? You want to try?
2 million.
2 million. Close, but not really. 22 million, just add a 2. 22 million people living in the North. Now, it looks like there's a lot more land in the South, but we know there's less people because there's less Confederacy. There's more land, it looks like. They've got Texas down there. So 22 million in the North, and I based the population in here on that. So think about, what do you think about in the South?
5 million. 12.
10, 12, someone was close, it's 9. But of that 9 million, 3.5 million are slaves. So over a third of the people living in the South are slaves. Isn't that crazy? A crazy number to think of. 9 million people live there, but of them, 3.5 million of them are slaves.
Didn't they ride against them?
Well, at times they tried to rebel, but anytime any group tried to rebel, the white man put them down and didn't allow it to happen. They did, they banded up small groups, tried to do it, but it didn't work. Slaves fought in the war. Some slaves fought for the Union. Some slaves even fought for the South. Both sides promised them something which they lied about. They promised their freedom, even though they wouldn't get it. Okay. We'll talk about probably the names for the troops later. Their cause for fighting also later. Economy. last chapter, or maybe a little bit, not too long ago, we talked about what was going on in the North, the way their economy has been changing, what's been happening in the North. So what do you think their North's economy is based on? Think about what we've been talking about. It's changed. Andrew?
Factories?
Yeah, factories. It's that industry, based on industry. The Industrial Revolution, right? Industrial Revolution. So a lot of things are based on the machines, and people are starting to work in the factories and the assembly line. So that's what it's like in the North. And it's not necessary to have slaves because the people are doing the jobs themselves. They want to work in these factories. They don't have the land to have farms where they need a ton of workers, and they need the slaves to work. So it's based on industry. Up here in the South, what's it based on? What'd you say? Agriculture. And they have a lot of land and resources to be able to grow things here in the South, so they need the slaves to work for them, because the more slaves you had, the more stuff you could grow and the more money you could make. And so all the people in the South knew it was necessary for them to have slaves in the South. That was what their economy was based on. That was their way of life. In the North, they didn't get it, they didn't understand it, they didn't want it, and they didn't agree with it. And that kind of leads us to the war, because the North wants to stop it, the South does not. And the South says the North is going against our rights, blah, blah, blah. They break away, boom, we have a war. All right. Kind of going with economy is railroads in the North. They have a lot of things they're making in their factories. Throw them on a railroad train, ship them out. Same in the South. You can use it, but they used them a lot more in the North. Because in the North, 75% of all the railroads in all of the entire country were in the North. So there's advantages to having railroads during a war and disadvantages. What are some advantages to having the railroad? Courtney? Transport. You transport lots of things, supplies, troops. What would be some disadvantages? Brennan?
You have to stay on a specific path.
Yeah. Anything else?
Could it be easier to hijack it?
Yeah. You could tear up the railroad. Steal some of the things. Good. South has obviously a lot fewer railroads. You can see on the map there, all the lines crisscrossed everything. All those are railroads, so you can see they are all up north. And at this time, transportation was getting really big in this Ohio River Valley over here. Is that right? Okay. And so all the stuff that was being made over here in this area, shipped on a train and just sped out over here, jump on the Mississippi River, come down south. Okay. So the railroads were very popular in the North. So it was good for their economy. All right, kind of sticking along with the economy, but more in the lines of the financial resources, where the wealth was coming from. In the North, okay, we know industry was the means of their economy, but if you were wealthy, what types of things were you probably doing as a job? If you were wealthy, how were you getting that money, do you think? Brennan?
Entrepreneurship.
Okay, good. Anything else? Think about what one of Andrew Jackson's big issues was.
Wait, what's the question?
How were people getting their wealth? The people that were wealthy in the North, where was it coming from? Doing what types of things?
Being a lawyer.
Okay, possibly. What other type? Think about Andrew Jackson and one of his issues. Caitlin? Possibly. That has to go with kind of manufacturing. Yeah? Another one? Thinking of Andrew Jackson? 3 issues. He had 3 major issues. The status of the Native American was one. States' rights was another. And then there was a third one. The banking. Yes. So in the North, the wealth was coming from people in the banking business, people in that manufacturing business. Is it not working?
Yeah.
It's working? We'll get a pencil over that bucket over there. Okay. The manufacturing and the shipping. Okay, a lot of shippers. So that's where the wealth was coming from in the North. Now in the South, how were you a wealthy person? Where were you getting your wealth from, Ethan?
Slaves.
Slaves? The more slaves you had, the more what could you have? Crops, which turned into which
Land.
land. So in the South, you had lots of land. You were wealthy. You had lots of slaves. You were wealthy. You had 1 or 2 slaves. You weren't wealthy. You had a lot of slaves and a lot of land, a huge plantation. You were very wealthy.
Did they auction the slaves off?
Yes, they had auctions. They traded them, sold them. Yes. All right, let's talk leadership. Whoops. Who's your president? Tyler, who's your president? Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln is president, and he is very experienced at being a lawyer. Very little experience in Congress, but he has some. But he has virtually no military experience. Is there any in there? Okay, perfect. No military experience. So that's going to make him struggle, maybe, during the Civil War. Now, on the South, they needed a president because they formed what they said was a country. And so who did they elect to be president?
Jefferson Davis.
Jefferson Davis from Mississippi. Jefferson Davis is from Mississippi, and he was a senator. And at one point in time, he was the Secretary of War, which means what about him, do you think, if he was the Secretary of War? Brennan?
More experience.
Very much so. He was very experienced. Because the Secretary of War is the person who advises the president. So he was that at one point. So he's got a lot of military experience. So looking at that on paper right now, the South has an advantage. Just on paper. All right. So Lincoln, what he wants to do, the reason he's fighting this war is because he wants to preserve the Union, make sure it stays together. He doesn't like the fact that those 11 states left, and he wants to eventually later on free the slaves. Jefferson Davis and the people in the South, they want their independence, and they want to keep their way of life, which is slavery. Okay, so sticking with leadership, we have generals. Anyone know any generals from the Union side? Any generals? There's a one.
Oh,
Brennan.
Ulysses S. Grant.
Ulysses S. Grant's one. Anyone know any others?
Short.
Who?
Sherrard. That guy.
Yeah. Sheridan's his name.
I just saw that.
Sheridan. Any others? Alright, so here's your generals. The ones that say USA obviously are USA. What? Pickett? He's in the South. Okay, the North had very few effectives until this guy, Grant. And Grant started to rise up as a very good general in the Union Army in about 1862. He did not take over the entire Union Army until late 63. It'd be after Gettysburg. It wasn't during Gettysburg, it was after Gettysburg.
All of these guys have beards.
Yeah, it must have been the thing back then to have beards and facial hair. Make you look.
So once over that George Washington, like when he was young, he used to wear like a gray wig.
Oh, probably. Because that made you appear higher
Like,
status.
now everybody like hates gray hair.
Yeah, back then it was privileged to wear that. I wouldn't want to. South is their greatest advantage was their generals. You've got Lee, Pickett, Stonewall Jackson. Have you heard of him? Okay. So those are some pretty good generals. Now Lee was the general for the entire Confederacy for the entire war. And these guys were West Point graduates, very brilliant men, a lot brighter than the North's generals. As a matter of fact, Lincoln actually asked Lee if he would be the Union general. And Lee said, I would love to. I'm against slavery. I'm for your cause. I believe in everything you're fighting for. However, I'm from Virginia, and I have to remain loyal to my state. I cannot leave my state, so I'm going to fight for them. Sorry. So if you think, if Lee would have said yes and been the general of the North, there's a good chance that this war could have been over in a couple months rather than 4 or 5 years. All right, so he was a loyal man. So you'll notice as we get going in the war that Lincoln fires quite a bit of his generals because they don't do what he asks. Fires and fires and fires, and finally gets Grant in there and he wins the war for them. And Meade was a really good general too. He won the Battle of Gettysburg.
Did Lincoln go and ask him himself?
I think he sent a letter. I think I have that a copy, a replica of that letter. I'll find it. Hang it up.
Gettysburg thing or one where we went to
The battlefield.
Yeah.
It was 3 days long. Yeah, and Meade was the general for that one. Where's he at? Meade up there's Meade down left corner. Okay, so each side had their own strategy on how to fight the war. They had their own strategy on how to fight the war. What do you think the North strategy was? If you were Lincoln and some of these generals, what would you want to do?
Like persuade like the South to join the Union.
Okay, perfect. That's good. That's one. Right away, as soon as they could, they wanted to bring the South back to the Union as soon as they could. That was like their number one goal. But they knew they were going to have to fight a war, so how do you think they would fight this war? How would you fight a war? Have any idea what you would do?
I'll go sneak.
Sneak attacks? Okay, any others? Brennan?
All out offensive.
You say defensive?
Yeah,
Offensive. Okay, offensive. Anyone else? Okay, well, pretty much they were offensive, actually. They said Winfield Scott came up with this plan called the Anaconda Plan, which was a naval blockade. What's an anaconda?
snakes.
It's a snake, and what do snakes do, anaconda snakes? They eat,
Strangle.
strangle, kill. They come around and they like squeeze the life out of you. Not a fun way to die. So what they wanted to do with this snake idea, you can see the snake there, and the part of the snake that's in the water is that naval blockade. The North had a much better navy than the South. And then the snake continues around and plans on going and splitting the South and strangling the heck out of them, basically, and capturing the capital of Richmond. And they want to do this as quick as possible. They want to be very aggressive and fight an offensive war so that they can get it over with as quick as possible. They don't want to fight a war. They don't want to be doing this, so they want to do it as quickly as possible. All right, so they want to go fast, get it done with. The South is going to have a different strategy. All right. So what do you think the strategy, if you're in the South, you want to be independent, you want to keep your slaves, what are you, if you're Robert E. Lee, what are you thinking you want to do? They're coming at you, you know they're probably going to want to reach your capital, what are you going to do? Run?
Persuade the Union to go south.
Persuade the Union to come to them? I don't know about that. Caitlin?
Protect the capital.
Protect your capital. Brennan?
Guerrilla tactics.
Guerrilla tactics? Any others? Alright. Well, they're going to play defense. They're going to fight a defensive war and just kind of play defense and take however long they need. They don't care how long the war lasts because they just want to win. And as soon as the Union gives up, then they've won. As long as they're fighting, then the war's not over. They haven't lost, and the Union hasn't brought them back. That means they're actually winning. All right, so the longer the war goes on for the South, it's good, and that means they're winning because they haven't given in. So they think if we fight long enough, the Union will give up, and they'll just get sick of it, and we'll win. And then they also want to capture D.C., which is the capital. It makes sense to capture the capital. Now, for the people in the North, the battles for them were being fought away from home because they were being fought in the South. So in the South, they're trying to protect their homeland. In the North, they have less military skills. In the South, they have really good skills with military and riding horses and using rifles because that's their way of life in the South, so they're used to it. Also in the South, they're used to violence. It's like tradition. It's the traditional way of their society, so they have no problem fighting and killing and being violent. So of all the things that we've written down and talked about and mentioned, who do you think looks like they should win? the South looks like they should win. On paper, they have the best. Their president has military experience. They have the best general in the entire country. Okay? They don't care how long they fight. They're just going to keep fighting as long as they can. They are skilled at military. They know how to use weapons. They know how to ride a horse and shoot a gun. They love violence. So it looks like they have the advantage. However, we know who wins, right? I hope we do. Okay? So it takes longer than we thought. We thought we could get done with it in a couple months, but we didn't. It takes a lot longer. We don't finish until 1864. Let me give you a little trivia facts about Lincoln that you might want to know. We know he's tall, right? How tall?
6'4".
What?
6'4".
6'4", there he is. 6'4", he was the skinniest president, 180 pounds. 6'4", 180, that's thin. He knew he was a homely-looking fellow, so he often used that as a joke and made fun of himself when he was talking. He was the first Republican president. He freed the slaves. And often he would put documents and letters and speeches inside that hat that he would carry. And so he'd get up to a speech, he'd take his hat off, and he'd pull his speech out or something, or he'd pull something out to give to someone. That's what he used to store things. He died 5 days after winning the Civil War. First president killed by an assassination. First president to be on a coin. What coin? Penny. And what else is he on? Good. He was an excellent student, but very rarely went to school. Oh, wrestling was his favorite sport. It says nobody could beat him. He was that good. He was a very good lawyer. He estimated, since he didn't go to school very much, but he was very well educated, he estimated that he had a total of 1 year of schooling. The play that was going on when he was assassinated was Our American Cousin, and he was killed by John Wilkes Booth. And after he was shot, they took him across the street to that home to be in a comfortable bed while he died, which we went to. And ironically, John Wilkes Booth, who shot him, had also at one point in time spent time in that bed because he rented a room there before. His wife and him held seances in the White House to contact their deceased sons. He dreamed often that he would be assassinated. Did not like being called Abe. He established Thanksgiving as a national holiday. When he was killed, his body traveled to 14 different cities to be viewed. There was actually a plot to steal Lincoln's body, so guards were placed at his tomb for a while. He loved Edgar Allan Poe, and after his death, his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, was committed to an insane asylum by her son. And she also was not allowed to be in the room as he was dying because she was so crazy, basically. They wouldn't let her be in there, so. Noah?
Do you think he was buried with, like, that suit and the hat?
I imagine so. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, John Wilkes Booth, part of himself, like, was he?
Yes. Yeah, John Wilkes Booth was big-time part of the South. Wanted to kill him sooner, but he couldn't get enough people to get in on it with him, and then he finally got him.
Why didn't the Secret Service,
There was no Secret Service.
so it was just...
There was no Secret Service. There were guards. At that time, you could just walk into the White House anytime you wanted to, and if you wanted, you just, stand in the lobby. If you wanted to talk to the president, you could. After that, no more. He did have guards, but many times he would say, don't worry about me. I don't need you, and he'd go through horseback through the town on his own. There was a guard outside his door, the door of the place where he watched the play, but it is said that the guard left during the play and went to the bar next door.
That is like one of the worst.
Did he get in trouble?
Plus John Wilkes Booth was a famous actor, so he just went into the room and was like, I'm going to see, it was no big deal. Did he get in trouble? Who, the guy?
Sorry, yeah.
Probably. I don't know if that was true or not, though. Yeah. So it was a big conspiracy, the whole Lincoln thing. Lincoln is the most written about person besides Jesus Christ. So he has a lot of books written about him. You saw all those books at that museum?
Yeah.
That's all the books written about him. I never found the book I was looking for. But, yes. So, any questions?